and we'll do the quick introductions to the public. We've got Mayor Beth Wytoski from Dayton. I know, right? We've got Commissioner Rick Olson from the County of Yamhill. We've got Mayor Scott Hill from McMinnville. We've got Superintendent Joe Morelock from Newberg. We have Councillor Remy Droukin from McMinnville. Uh-oh. Mayor Wytoski, can you mute the guy?
Okay.
That really wonderful man down there. We have Mayor Michael Cape of Amity. We've got Shannon Buckmaster from Chehalis Valley Chamber of Commerce. We've got Scott Cooper from MEDP, McMinnville Economic Development Partnership. We've got Mayor Rick Rogers from Newberg. Woo! His hair hasn't gotten longer. We have Joya Goodrum from McMinnville Chamber of Commerce. We have Abhishek Stone from SEDCOR. We've got Diane McLaren from Chemeketa Community College. We got Lori Gilmore from the city of Yamhill. And I think that we have everybody. Thank you all for joining us today, and thanks for the community for watching. A lot of big news in the last week, and I'd like to get started right away by having people talk as they wish about the guidance to schools from the Oregon Department of Education. And to lead us off on that, I'd love to turn it over to Joe Morelock from Newberg School District. What would you like to tell people on the call today and in the community, Joe?
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you for providing me the opportunity to talk today. And I think the first thing is that everybody just needs to relax a little bit because we don't have all the full plans in place. I think, after I was telling a little story before that, on March 13th, when we went into an early week of spring break, it was also a day that began to snow in the middle of the day. And so we were having all this kind of craziness where we may be looking at an early snow closure on the last day before we go into an extended spring break, and then eventually onto a whole other kind of learning experience for kids. So right now we're in the middle of major planning and looking at multiple contingencies. So any plan that we create has to be able to pivot to either a fully in-person model, if that were to happen later, or into a fully distance learning model. So everything that we're building is specifically tuned to allow us to go one way or the other, depending upon what happens. The Department of Education contacted us a couple of weeks ago when they were looking for districts to help them build some sample plans. And so our middle school was included in the guidance for some of the initial planning for districts to have an idea of what it looks like. It's relatively overwhelming to think about how we can do all of the work at keeping people safe and healthy, and at the same time, providing an in-person educational experience for our students and their families. So a large part of what the planning is for now is to look, and this is I would guess the majority of school districts are looking at a hybrid learning model. And hybrid means that there will be some work that's done online and some work that's done in person. And, right now our models are looking more closely at a situation where students would come on some days of the week, and then on other days they would be at home or other locations to do work remotely. So as we kind of move forward, we have the biggest considerations under our public health protocols. Of course, we're doing all the contact tracing. We have to have an outbreak plan. We have to have a plan for screening and isolation, which sounds like not a big deal, except for not all schools have a health room, right? Sometimes it's just the main office. So we're having to reconsider spaces within our buildings that we can use for isolation spaces if that would be necessary. We also have to build cohorts of students that fit within the 6-foot recommendation. Not all our classrooms, all classrooms are basically between 700 to 900 square feet, which provides a challenge to put more than maybe a dozen or 15. Which is hopefully about half, but sometimes it may require that we cut the groups into thirds, into cohorts, so we can keep them, so we can kind of do the contact tracing and monitor that. So a lot of the work is around figuring out how to get cohorts in. Does it look like a rotating schedule? What do we do for cleaning protocols when you have groups that switch? Everything from busing to lunch service all has another set of complications. Just during the time when we were off from after spring break all the way through the end of the year, we served 123,000 meals to students. and that was a significant operation. And so thinking about how to do that now when you have people both inside and outside of classrooms also provides a certain level of complexity. So we're developing plans, looking at possibly a Monday, Wednesday, and then a Tuesday, Thursday. We're considering there may be differences between our elementary and then our secondary schools. We are also trying to figure out ways to support certain students who need more support. We know students who are struggling academically. We know our students of color, our English learning students, and other students who receive special education services may need to be in create cohorts for. In those cohorts, we have transportation in building, sometimes speech and language. We also are dealing with how do we do entry, arrival and departure. There are some grocery stores that have one door where you come in and one door where you go out. We're considering some of the same kinds of things. How do we screen them when they come in? How do we screen staff as they come in? It's most likely we won't be able to even have on-site volunteers, which we have relied on in the past to support school operations, just because of the challenge in having additional people in our buildings. So spending a lot of time working on what our isolation measures might be. How do we deal with the connections with students? This last year, or this last few months, we deployed Google Voice accounts out to most instructional staff so they can make connections and make phone calls, and not having to use their own phones. And we did video links. Most of the time it was asynchronous, and so one of the large pieces of feedback we got from parents in the community, because we asked about how distance learning went. A lot of them would prefer to have some kind of a synchronous, some kind of a live session where they could connect with their peers and connect with their teacher. And so working on how we schedule that in and around the school day, which would be in person. So there are lots of things for us to figure out. This is the 1.0 version, as the Department of Ed has called it. They're considering, they're believing they'll probably have a 4.0 version with lots of little versions in between. And so there are lots and lots of changes that are happening. And that's also not including, of course, the news we have about what our possible budget reductions could be. That's just a whole other layer of fun and opportunity for us to consider as well as we build these plans moving forward. But everything from hand washing to safety drills, events, how we do transitions in hallways, to how do we line up. And then, of course, how do we teach students with a reduced amount of time and a reduced amount of contact over what will be an unknown amount of time. So lots of work going into the plans, and at the same time, trying to remain flexible because we know the plans are going to change. So lots of things coming up. People are worried about, and we have people on both sides of being worried about sending their kids to school, and some people worried about not having their kids in school all day. We've also expanded our Chehalem Online Academy. We know that there will be some increased interest in just going online fully. We've had that program available for many years, and so that program we are ready to expand as we may accept more students into that. So there are kind of an 8-step program. I'm sure most of you have read the blueprint. But there's also equity, all the instructional things, family and community engagement, the mental and social emotional health, and then just how we do staffing. We may have staff who have to stay home, and so how do we utilize our instructional staff who are home while we're also trying to provide a cohort model in the building, because that it could end up that we'd have to basically double hire staff in a time that we're looking at reductions. So just lots of happening. I've probably talked enough. I don't know if there are any questions from the group. I want people to know that these are early plans, and if you have concerns, please contact your district. Let them know, what they're thinking, and I'm sure that that every district is putting out the information they have when they have it. There are no top secret plans to take over the world that are happening. We're all kind of in this together and following the guidance and trying to keep people safe and healthy, and provide for every student the best we can.
Great, thank you very much, Superintendent.
I have a question for Joe.
And then we'll go to Councillor Drapkin after that.
Okay. So you want me to go ahead and go first, Casey? Yeah, Joe, I have a couple of questions more tactical or operational questions with all these changes that the school districts are making, and Newberg included. Have you had any pushback or any issues with your labor unions and them wanting to be involved with these decisions and not have a lot of these schedules set up with input from the teachers associations? That's my first question. My second question is, I saw some on the ODA last night that they're thinking about going to block. Some schools are thinking about going to block shifts where instead of maybe 6 classes a day, they'll have 2 3-hour blocks a day. And that, especially for the younger kids, how do you keep, in a 3-hour straight block, how do you keep those kids involved? And because their memories aren't that long, so how do you keep them active if you were to go to a 3-hour block, how do you keep those kids active or hold their attention for a 3-hour block?
I'm not sure that you could hold my attention for a 3-hour block, so I'll just start with that. And I think that's, first of all, the plans at every level will be slightly different. So the blocking of time may be more related to how we do food service, the shortened amount of time. At some places, at one point we were considering doing a morning group and an afternoon group with a large break in between, so we could go through and clean bathrooms and clean surfaces to bring in the second cohort. That requires a double bus run, of course, which then essentially doubles our cost. So that's kind of out the window. You also have to remember that we're not going to be able to use playgrounds because there's no way that we could sanitize all of those playgrounds. They take a lot of work to just clean, right? So your break time, your recess time at a younger level might just be running around with a couple of things that you could sanitize, like a ball or something else. And so the same thing for our secondaries. We're considering some blocking, but that also means you might rotate staff through. So in many countries in the world, students stay in the same classroom and their teachers rotate in. So we've talked about, at secondary, we already have a humanities block, which is essentially language arts and social studies. And so you may have the same teacher, you may have different ones. You may do some blocking on opposite days where you would block one set of classes, and then on the other day a week you come in and you block a different set to give some extended time to help work with students. But for elementary, it's a long day as it is. A 6-hour day would be pretty brutal without some kind of significant break. So a lot of that is more around, can we schedule in, and what do we focus on? That's another instructional question. Do we just focus on English language arts and math, and then we do some other things at home? They have to think about what does that look like? What can you get in those hours that you've got? And so I think there's still quite a bit of work to do on that and what the day is structured like. But so much of that has to do with cleaning protocol and, of course, keeping people's attention. We do some things that are movement within classrooms as well already, some brain breaks and some other things we'll have to do. We hope that it will be a very nice long summer all the way into September, October, so we can do some more things outside. The challenge of when it gets really messy and now you're inside all day long also makes it hard. And your first question I lost track of was about our associations.
Right. Associations.
Right. So even I will say that during the time we worked on our planning under the governor's order, which eventually I think became Executive Order 2020, but during that time we actually included both of our associations, and we met once or twice a week to go over the plans and to look at them and to take feedback, because we knew that they were also going to have to work with their members to explain why we're doing things totally differently than what's in their collective bargaining agreement. So those are always a challenge because it's not always super clear what we're doing, especially during this distance learning when we're transitioning from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. But I will have to say that we included them early and often so we could get some feedback about things that would be possibly major issues. Most of their focus really was on keeping their members safe and healthy. And so, a lot of the work was around, what that would look like. And then setting up times for them to be able to work together and having enough time within the day to do that. Because as you all well know, it just takes us longer to do it this way. And so sometimes, we had built in some additional time for them to work with their professional learning communities. But in this last time, we worked pretty well together, making sure we included them, getting their input early. And sometimes there were just things like, this is what we're going to do. This is what we have to do. And we could do that because we were under the executive order of the governor. But by and large, they were things that made the most sense. We could say, we've chased 74 rabbits down their individual holes, and here's what we found out when we got all the way down there. And then they could ask questions, and they would go back to their building representatives and talk about it. So I think it was really helpful for them to be included once or twice a week. I just had a regular call with them and a few members of my staff to go over what the plans would be.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Drabkin, would you like to go next? And then I believe that Mayor Wytoski had a comment to make too.
Two quick things. One, it's come up in here before about school buses. I'm wondering if you can address how students will be able to get to school. And then two is, I know the McMinnville School District sent out a survey to parents asking a host of questions. One of those questions was whether or not if you have multiple children, having them go to school at different times would be burdensome. And I have heard overwhelmingly, of course, that if you have differently aged children and you were having to pick up and drop off continuously throughout the day, that would be very difficult. So I'm wondering if you can address that as well. Thank you.
Sure. So the guidance for school buses is a little bit different than the guidance for in-building. So at this point, they're telling us it's essentially 3 feet, which would be about 1 kid per seat, if you think about it. So it reduces our capacity to transport by about half, which could possibly mean more routes. That's another thing we have to plan on. Do we have everybody arriving at the same time, or are they arriving in waves and then going in waves? A lot of that has to do with just how do you schedule your drivers and how do you get all the people in. So we are working on those with our bus company, who I just want to give a quick shout out. They were amazing in this whole process of converting to delivery drivers to get thousands of meals out to people. And so we've had a very good working relationship with them to do that. So that's part of the protocol, is that they would change that up to be able to minimize the amount of contact that students would have. Drivers would be required to wear face masks or face coverings, things like that. And we're not exactly sure what that'll look like. But the second part of that is about families. So, and doing cohorts, one of the things, we also did a huge survey out to all of our parents, English and Spanish, and our students to kind of find out what people thought, and our staff as well. For us to be able to put kids into groupings with their siblings was something that came up, because we know that, if student A and their sibling student B are on totally different schedules, somebody's coming Monday, Wednesday, somebody else is going Tuesday, Thursday, that's a pretty significant burden upon them. We have about 5,000 kids, but we know we can probably manage a lot of that cohorting together. It may not work out perfectly every time, but we think we're probably, we have that question, I don't know whether we like it or not. We do a lot of big challenges in a cohort model, frankly, is that it's still in a couple days a week that the kids are coming. And so if people have jobs, people have to get to work and do those things. That will be a challenge. And then we're probably not able to provide major amounts of childcare, right? We couldn't take in another few hundred kids for the rest of the day to have them. So making it as easy as possible on families who have units of kids coming on the same days. Part of the reason why we're looking at blocking the schedules, so it's easier for us to say, all 6th graders at some point are going to take language arts. And so it might be that these 2 children need to be in these 2 different ones because their sibling is going to the elementary school, and they may be riding the same bus, right? So we may have mixed buses just based upon neighborhoods, and it also just may be based upon levels, elementary, secondary, like we've done in the past. So yeah, there are a lot of details working on that, but we've heard that loud and clear. And we understand the burden that puts on people. So we'll be working to do as best we can to put kids into cohorts that make sense.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mayor Wytoski, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Can you hear me? Okay,
yes.
Great. Thank you. I don't have specific questions, I guess, but maybe just some follow-up comments. The conversations in my community in the city of Dayton, a lot of them have been very reactionary. So just as the public shares this video, I would really like to encourage people to try to be, as patient as we can be. I really appreciate that Superintendent Morelock pointed out this is like the 1.0 version. This is not necessarily what schools will look like. And so having a knee-jerk reaction, I got some very negative communications from folks yesterday who were really concerned, parents who want to take back the school, who want to, have all kinds of reactions. Some of them are more reasonable, like this isn't going to work for us, we might homeschool. Some of them are a little more extreme, like we're all going to go protest until the schools are just normal. And so to that point, I obviously, the children, the safety of the kids that are in our classrooms is at the forefront, but it's not just those kids. They also go home to family members. Some of them in my community, many live in multi-generational homes and might be going home to folks who have significant vulnerabilities. Additionally, there are food service workers, custodians, instructional assistants, bus drivers, like Mayor Cape, administrators, secretaries, and of course, teachers who all need to have a safe workplace as well. So, just a reminder to the community, I know some folks have said, well, COVID-19 isn't that dangerous for kids. Let's just send them to school normally and not worry about it. It's not just kids in schools. There's a lot of folks that are affected by those. And so we need to keep all of that in mind as both these initial plans are made and also as they evolve with new information and new data. And I know this morning on our statewide call with the League of Oregon Cities, it's apparent that unfortunately the data was not super positive in these last couple of days. We're seeing some of these spikes in infections that, while they were expected, are still a little bit alarming. And so we just need to remember that while we're really excited to see playgrounds reopening, that we need to try to use good judgment and avoid crowds and make sure we are having kids wash before and after use, and trying to maintain some semblance of distance. And of course, I understand the challenge of that. I have 3 young children, and they want to run and hug and touch everybody they see, especially because they haven't seen them for a while. But I just want to continue to urge caution in that regard so that we don't see those, the increases in infection rates get to a point where we have to rein things back in, because I think that would be incredibly difficult, both on our economy and, of course, socially and for mental health.
Great. Thank you very much for those thoughts, Mayor. Superintendent, you're welcome to respond to any of that too if you want, since we still kind of have you on the Warren seat, as it were. And then I wanted to pass off the to kind of move it to Representative Gomberg for his kind of statewide thoughts on the issue.
Great. Well, I appreciate what the mayor has just said, and it's true. The better we do at being cautious and getting into it, the faster we can get back to what people hope for and dream for. They want to get back to what they're used to, but running into it too fast. I have one of the things that happens when we do a snow closure sometimes is not necessarily about how bad the snow is in downtown Newberg, which it might not be, but it has to do with how many staff I can get to come to school to actually operate the building. And so the safety of our adults is extremely important, and without them in the building, we can't operate school anyway. So it's not just the safety of the kids, it is the safety of the adults. And so operating it in the most, the safest fashion we can early and being cautious means that we can get back to what people expect much sooner. Because if we don't, then we're just creating a new vector for further infection, and that's not something we want to do. So I appreciate her words, and I would wholeheartedly agree.
And thank you. To that end, then, Representative Gomberg, can you give us kind of the state perspective, or how have you seen the educational operation plan?
Well, thanks for that opportunity, Commissioner. In all candor, education has not been the first thing on my mind this week. And so I appreciate that overview. But I'll tell you what has been on my mind this week. And first of all, goodness, the emergency board last Friday seems like a million years ago. But you will know that at that meeting, we allocated about $250 million for programs that include rent supports or utility supports for people that are unemployed or underemployed. We put money into support for victims of domestic and sexual violence, broadband, and behavioral issues. And I got into a little bit of hot water, quite frankly, because at the meeting I said, I support this funding for people that are underemployed and they need our help right now, but there wouldn't be as many of them that need our support if the employment division could actually get checks out to people who are entitled to that money and have been waiting for that money for going on 3 months now. So I raised that concern. The other concern is that the dollars are generally being allocated on a per capita basis. And you will recall that the city of Portland and Multnomah and Washington counties received direct subsidies from the federal government. But now we are taking the money that came to Oregon and dispersing it on a per capita basis so that Portland will essentially get a double share of those dollars. That was of concern to me as well. And as a matter of fact, there were 2 items on the agenda intended to support and help small businesses. We were successful in having those pulled off the agenda for review rather than sending them out on a per capita basis with as much as a third of that money going to the metropolitan center. Hopefully we can structure that in a way that our communities will get a little bit more than they would have otherwise. But now I'm going to change the subject completely because that was last week. Last week, Lincoln County had 9 positives on record. Tillamook County had been sitting at 6 positives for over a month. But we have gone in Lincoln County from 9 positives to this morning 170 positives. We have had serious outbreaks here, and that's of serious concern. And I share that with you because I know that you're looking at challenges in Yamhill County as well. But we learned something very interesting in Lincoln County, and that is when Pacific Seafood came in and tested all of their employees. They tested 300 employees. They came back with 120 positives. 95% of those positives showed no symptoms. And so the issue was that we've got people walking around that don't feel sick that are still registering positive. And in Lincoln County, we had some additional challenges because many of these people did not speak English as a first language. And so when the contact tracers connected with them to try and share information and to ask them to self-quarantine, there may not have been a complete understanding of those instructions. Plus, you had the issue that for many of these people, work was essential. If they didn't have paychecks coming in, they weren't able to take care of their family. And so there was some impetus to get back out and continue life as we currently understand normal to be. And they went shopping and they went to restaurants and they engaged with their friends because they didn't feel sick. And now we are looking at as many as 6 more outbreaks in the county that are spreading to restaurants, spreading to grocery stores, spreading to other businesses. So that is our circumstance in Lincoln County right now. I think that as we struggle with that, and as I have worked to get the governor and the health department to provide immediate support to our overtaxed, no, that's not the right phrase, our overstressed health department, that there are lessons that other counties can learn, and we need to continue to be vigilant.
Thank you, Representative. I have had obviously your county, Lincoln County, on my heart this last week. So, is there? And I want to say this. You know, we have a lot of people with a lot of knowledge and resources here. Is there anything that Lincoln County needs right now that they're not getting?
Well, thank you very much for that question. I think the main challenge that they are facing is finding people who are bilingual who can help communicate. Their immediate needs had been with people that could be Spanish translators. They also had a number of people who who spoke a Spanish, well, a dialect, and were primarily conversant in the Mam language, which I understand is a Guatemalan dialect. There's also been a lot of rumors floating around, and rumors that that people had come into the community from outside the country, from outside the state, were not long-term workers, or that the businesses here had brought people in and spread vulnerabilities around. There's an excellent article on OPB today, kind of outlining where we are. But what it will tell you is that the people who were testing positive, all but a very few of them were permanent Newport residents and permanent employees of Pacific Seafood, and that they were not bringing people in from outside the area who were bringing exposure to us. Just for a little bit of clarity there, Pacific Seafood does hire additional employees during the high season. They did have some employees that they were bringing in from, I believe, the Ukraine, but those people were being tested before they were put on the job, and they were not on the job yet when this outbreak occurred. So that's a little bit of rumor control. Casey, thank you so much for that question. If you've got additional people that can assist, I'm sure the Lincoln County Health Department would appreciate your offer of support.
And I'll just note that I was listening and also sending an email connecting you to our HHS director around that. I don't actually think I have any emails for Lincoln County commissioners in my email box, so.
I can get you that.
Yeah, we've started the conversation, so people can do this from any county, right? All right, thank you very much for sharing all that hard information with us, and for also taking out some of the rumors, because I've heard them as well.
He has a very good story.
Okay, great. Great, thank you very much. I'd love to move on to mayors right now. And what would you like to tell people in your community? And I'm going to start with Mayor Rogers from Newberg, if we will.
All right, well, great. Thank you, Casey. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Hello, folks, and good to see you all. I got to start with one question, though. Commissioner Olson, behind you is some very, very colorful stuff that I'm dying to know what it is. So at some point, you'll have to share what exactly that is. Otherwise, to the good folks that might be listening in Newberg and throughout the county, Mayor Wytoski mentioned this morning the League of Oregon Cities call. And one thing that really came through to me, and this was from the National League of Cities, they were talking about this, and again, this is sort of the master of the obvious, but it was poignant, I thought, is that so we're currently in the midst of a pandemic, as we all know. We're into a midst of an economic crisis, and we're in the midst of sort of unrest regarding racial issues and police procedures. In all of those instances, people of color are disproportionately affected. So, as Representative Gomberg mentioned, as Beth mentioned, it is very much that way through no fault, except as Representative Gomberg mentioned, folks need to go to work. People need to go to work. They aren't always experiencing the symptoms. So I think we just in all need to keep that in mind. Otherwise in Newberg, we met with Superintendent Morelock and the city manager Weinheimer earlier this week. One of the things that we promised to our citizenry is to get out and really start the conversation surrounding race, institutional bias, and implicit bias. And so we're going to start that. The thought would be it'll go probably through the school district, through George Fox University, and the city as starting place, and then expand the discussion from there. And with the hope that we can make something good out of a tragedy, and try to get a conversation going that will be beneficial to all. So those are some of the main things. Otherwise, we're back at City Council Monday night. So anybody wants to tune in, 6 o'clock, you can tune in and see how much fun we have with City Council. So there it is. Other than that, good to see you all. And Commissioner Olson, I'm dying to know what you got there.
Also, I'll tell you, Mayor Rogers, is I've been collecting Pez dispensers since I've been about 10 years old. I have over 5,000 Pez dispensers in memorabilia, some that are worth $2. but I have some that are worth upwards of $1,000, $1,500. So my whole office, you're only seeing the back hanging wall, but my whole office is just covered with box sets, gift sets, watches, wacky wobblers. Everything is Bez.
Well, that is awesome. I did not know this about you. So there we go. Shannon, Buckmaster reminded me also that we've got a couple of vacancies coming up, our city council. So for the fall, districts 1, 3, and 5 will all be up and contested. 1 and 3, Denise Bacon and Elise Yarnell Holloman are going to run again. Jean Pyros will not be in District 5. So if anybody's interested. And then we've got a couple of city committees that are vacant as well. So check out newbergoregon.gov and you can find out more.
And
thank you, Shannon.
And if I'm not, thank you. If Facebook is not spreading misinformation, Patrick Johnson is stepping down.
Yep, we received his letter of resignation. So that's that's District 5, and so we'll hear from him on Monday, and then we'll actively start looking for someone to fill that seat.
Okay, thank you. I've really appreciated all of his thoughtfulness. So I'm
me too.
Sad to see him go.
He's going to be missed. He'll be missed. So Patrick, we're going to miss you.
All right, I bet he's watching now. We need a little tag for him. Mayor Hill, welcome back. And what would you like to tell people in the city of McMinnville and here on the call?
Well, thank you, Casey, and it's good to see everyone. Just a couple of things just to update. Number one, we have opened our playgrounds, and after the call this morning, and Sarah from the Oregon Health organization talking a little bit about the yellow light on the phases, but we're continuing to do that. We've posted in McMinnville that our playground equipment and amenities, you need to enter at your own risk. We are not cleaning the equipment, and so the wearing of protective face masks and the cleaning before and after, to go to our playgrounds at your own risk. Also, this Tuesday, unless we hear something over the weekend, our library is scheduled to reopen, and that will be on a limited basis, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday from noon to 5. We are going to institute a number of procedures to keep that safe. The entry to the library will be the old entry on the north side, kind of in that little grove of trees and garden area, and exit will be through the main entrance. There will be time limits being in the library, and as we indicated, there will be a certain number of individuals that are able to go into the library at any given time. But we've heard a lot of public that are very excited about the opportunity to go to the library with their kids, because that's a source of learning from them. The other thing is I see that both Scott and Joya are on the line, and I'll have them because they're part of our stable table to talk about 2 items of significance for McMinnville. One of those is the opening of on-street dining in 3rd Street on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then the other would be our business assistance that we're looking at trying to bring some dollars and a program to help businesses restart. The dining and the tourism piece, we're looking at end of the month, 1st of July, that possibly will be starting. And so we're excited about that. But again, this week has been a week that gives us caution. Again, I think people have to realize as we go into phase 2 how important it is to wear your mask and to wash your hands before and after. I think there's a laxing of some of those protocols. The other piece that we heard this morning on the LOC call is that although we are under the average of those that are being tested being positive, the state right now is at a 2.9%, and we our goal at the state is 5%, but it's the rate of increase that we're seeing. And cases seem to be coming from the workplace where things may be a little more lax. So my thought to citizens on this call is to be vigilant and to truly wear your mask and clean and in coming and going. The last thing that I would like to share, well, two last things that I'd like to share. Number one, met with the hospital this week, and the McMinnville Hospital has capacity. They've got PPE, very few. They've only treated 3 cases of COVID over the whole time frame. And so Lori shared with us that things are going well. They're doing elective surgeries. They're doing about 30 tests per day, and a lot of those are for those that are going into elective surgery. Then the last thing I will just mention is McMinnville Water and Light. We have something called the Helping Hands program where customers can donate money to help those that are struggling with making their payments. McMinnville Water and Light and the city are putting in about 5 times the amount that comes for that program. We have we're not cutting off service. We have waived any fees for payment if you want to do it on credit cards, and we have expended about $80,000 of help so far, and we'll continue to do that. And so, again, I think I would say the same as Mayor Rogers and Beth. To continue to be vigilant in protecting yourself, protecting your family as we go through this. Thank you, Casey.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you for those sobering words. And I just I forget to do this, but I'm very grateful for everybody who shows up here and shares your thoughts with the community. It's tremendous to me, and so thank you. Thank you. Every Tuesday and Friday, I'm impressed by all of your wise words. So. All right, thank you. Unless there are questions for Mayor Hill. All right, I'm gonna move on to Mayor Cape of Amity. Mayor Cape, what would you like to tell people today?
Yeah, thanks. I'm in the office today. They took me out of my mobile office into the main office, so a little bit different environment for me today. I just kind of want to, we've all heard about the numbers, and where we're at with cases. And so, I think it just it underscores that we need to be smart and careful as we move forward. And, so I wanted to kind of talk about the information from ODE that came out, and it's something I've been asking for and wanting, and I know a lot of people have. And my main message was kind of piggybacking off of what Mayor Wytoski and the superintendent said is, to me, it's nothing's really surprising what's in there. Most of it, I think a lot of people could have guessed that, yeah, this is what it's going to be. I'm really, to me, the big key is it finally gave us enough information to say, yes, go ahead and start making your plans. Start figuring out what school's going to look like. And yes, this is version 1.0. And yeah, there's going to be changes to it, but at least we can start that process. And once we start it, then we can start answering the question of what's it going to look like? Because that's what we get so much of. I get it from my bus drivers that I work with. I get it from every parent that I talk to. They all want to know what's it going to look like? What protections is there going to be in place for me? And so we finally get some of those answers. And I agree with the superintendent. I think by and large, almost every school is going to have to do some kind of a hybrid system. And like what Commissioner was saying, is that some kind of a A-B block, one group of kids in the morning versus the afternoon. I agree with the superintendent. I don't think morning afternoon grouping is going to work because your transportation costs are going to be so high for that. But maybe an A-B group where you have the group A students come in on Monday and the group B students come in on Tuesday, and how does that look? And maybe having teachers moving to classrooms instead of students moving to classrooms. All those kind of things are I think what we're going to see. and every school gets to do it a little bit differently to fit their needs and styles and what their facilities will allow. So I know here in Salem Kaiser, I'm looking at our time frame. We've been working on it a little bit already in trying to get ready for this. And so we've done some of the prep work. We are looking at by early July, kind of having most of our plan hashed out, and then sending it out to different stakeholder groups, whether that's some parents and students and some administrators and teachers, to get their input on the plans and how it will work, and then hopefully be able to present something to the general public by middle of July. And that's ideally what would be presented to the Marion County Health Department for their approval, and then assuming that works, then ODE sign off on it. So, we still are looking for a little bit more guidance on the transportation side. That's wasn't super clear in what came out. And again, what has been presented is more of the transit district guidelines, which, just by and large, they won't work on a school bus, not physically able to follow those. So, and I know the superintendent said, half the ridership on a school bus. We're calculating closer to a third, because it wouldn't be one student per seat, because you'd have to have, at least on our calculations and our spacing of seats, you'd have to have one student and then an empty row behind that student and then the next student, because the space between the seats is less than 3 feet. And so you'd kind of have to crisscross across the aisles and have one student in each seat as you crisscross. And so that's going to, for us, I think that's going to be about 13 students max per bus. And, we transport around 15,000 students a day. And so, of course, if we go to that kind of AB block schedule, that would be cut in half, but still 7,500 students a day. That's a big number when you're talking, 12, 13 kids per bus. So there's a lot of work that has to be done with that, and how do we make those things happen and all of that. But I'm excited that we finally have something that gave us that permission to say yes, go ahead, move forward. So as far as the city of Amity, I just want to say I know people have been asking about the park, and the construction has started on our stuff in the park. It is on schedule to hopefully be completed by June 30th. And so, hopefully right around the 4th of July, we'd be looking at opening up that park so that people can use it, which might be a nice time. So
yeah, definitely.
I think that's all I've really got, but thank you. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions for Mayor Cape? All right, he's got a big district that he works as part of, so it's good. I love having these 3 different school scale perspectives. Thank you. Before I move on to Commissioner Olson, I want to make sure that some of the business leaders here on the call get comments in before they have to move on to their other calls. So I'm going to start with Joya Goodrum. And I apologize, I should have gone to Shannon as soon as I was done with Mayor Rogers, but we'll figure it out. Joya, what would you like to tell people in the community today? Actually, what we'll do is we'll go to Shannon Buckmaster. Shannon, what would you like to tell people in the community today?
Well, we've had actually really, Joya's on the phone, sorry. We've had such great representation from Newberg today. I certainly want to echo the sentiments that our mayor and our superintendent shared today. We have had an additional business focus on liability and risk management as people return to work. And I do want to remind all employees that if you do have a safe opportunity to return to work, it's part of your obligation in receiving any sort of supplemental benefits that you do return to a safe work environment. The flip side of that is if you are not able to safely return, and that includes not having access to childcare, being compromised or at a higher risk category, or caring for somebody or sharing a household with somebody in those risk categories, we are still under the Family Protection Act that's still a viable reason to decline returning to work. And so just being thoughtful about that from both sides of the conversation, sometimes being willing to have difficult conversations with your employees or your employer, because we want to make sure that we move forward with positive, healthy relationships, and of course, reduce risk and frustration for everybody involved. And as a reminder, the Family Protection special legislation is current through December 31st, 2020. So we have several more months of what this looks like as for a responsible working relationship. That didn't go away just because we've had several revisions since then.
Right, good. Thank you very much. That's a good reminder.
Thanks.
Very, very important reminder. I wanted to come back to you. I apologize. I actually I totally spaced, and Mayor Wytoski never got her own update. We focused on her educational update. So Mayor Wytoski, what would you like to tell people in the community?
Yeah, thanks for skipping me. I know where I am on your list now. That's fine. I know. Well, I'm not in the office today. Today is my daughter's 8th birthday, so we're on a vacation. We're mostly, of course, staying in the vacation home, but we're really enjoying the deck and the smell of juniper and pine, and we're still having a good time. For my community.
Can we sing to your daughter? Is your daughter right there? Can we?
Oh my gosh, that would be super cool. Can I give my update and then call her over here?
Yeah, let's do it.
She would probably love that. That would be really fun.
There we go.
I think Rick Olson is especially good at singing happy birthday. So let's do that. Right, Commissioner? Good deal. Okay, for my community,
Anything you say, Beth.
What, Rick?
Anything you say.
Oh, that's good boy.
I've always trusted you.
I like that. Thank you, Commissioner. Some stuff I do want to make sure my community is aware of is that when you look at the breakdown of cases in Yamhill County, that we do have cases in our zip code. I think there's a pretty common perception in Dayton that there are no cases in or near us. I do want to clarify that even though it's in the less than 5, we have had confirmed cases in 97114, and I want people to know that. Also looking at that county data, we are seeing some community spread. And again, it's not very high numbers, but I want my community to know that this is something that we need to be cautious of moving forward. With the parks, similar to Mayor Hill, we posted signs about social distancing, suggesting masks, and we did install hand sanitizer stations at our parks. And also we restored bathroom functions, and we are sanitizing that, but we are not sanitizing the playgrounds themselves, and are asking our residents to avoid crowds and enjoy those with some caution, making sure that kids are clean, hopefully before and after, to avoid spread. I really want to make sure that my message, as we do reopen and as we shift, is consistent with data, and the data is saying that that COVID is still out there, and I think that there's almost a false sense of security that because we're reopening as a result of like the elimination of infections, but that's actually not the case. I have tried to kind of explain reopening is really just trying to balance kind of the threat of the disease with the economic and emotional toll that shutting down takes. And so I want to make sure that my community is aware of that we're not over the threat. We just have other threats that we need to acknowledge, and therefore we're shifting with that new information. I want to encourage, of course, like I have before, messages of empathy, not just on responding to COVID, but like we heard on the LOC call this morning, of course, we have multiple crises going on. We have people highly affected by the economic crisis. We have people who are directly affected or voicing support for the significant concerns related to race relations and police use of force and things like that. On schools, there's all kinds of divisive opinion. And one thing, again, that I want to caution the community on is assuming that because you and your friends might feel the same way, that everybody feels that way. Yesterday, that was a pretty common theme with some context I had from community members that said, this is what we want. This is what all the parents want. But for example, as my community was very, very excited to have their parks open, I got almost as many, and it wasn't quite as many, but I got almost as many very concerned contacts in our first 24 hours of opening as I did really encouraging ones. I had lots of people say, I'm so happy the park's open. And I had other people say, people are not distancing, they're not washing their hands, you need to shut parks down, you need to have them supervised. The message is not actually unified, but I think because partly because of social media, and people filtering within their own friend groups and self-selection, that people think there's really consistent opinion and response. And we need to realize that that's not the case, that this stuff is, there's broad perspective and opinion on how to respond to all of the crises that we're really in the middle of. And we should try to both expand our own perspectives, listen to other experiences, take in multiple sources of data, and just be empathetic and reasonable. On school reopenings, one thing that I wanted to kind of bring up, and I don't know if Representative Gomberg or other legislators might be able to bring this up, and that is the issue of endorsements. There have been a few suggestions that perhaps the teachers would rotate as opposed to the kids between classes. Of course, in a high school setting, that wouldn't be something we can even practically do at this point. I, for example, am certified to teach social studies. I could competently teach some other subjects. I would not do well in teaching some, but I'm not permitted to teach them. So that might be something that ODE, TSPC, or perhaps a subcommittee on education can really look at, is letting teachers, have more flexibility in teaching outside their endorsement areas, so that if we are to rotate, or if we are to work block schedules, that perhaps folks that have kind of a narrow specialty, which is very common at secondary level, could kind of stretch that and teach some other things, even if they weren't writing the curriculum. That'd be something I think that could create some flexibility with some of those. And I did want to bring that up. The last point I just want to make is just to keep in mind as we all walk through this together, that we have to balance, public opinion with science and data in making all these directions and decisions, and that we should always question. We shouldn't necessarily just absorb and accept everything that comes from somebody just because it comes from a higher position, but we should. We should do research, and when data and science and opinion kind of points a direction, we shouldn't be afraid to support that.
All right, thank you very much, Mayor.
Oh, Casey, just to warn you, I just got an alert that I have 5% battery. So if
that's funny, because my internet just got dropped. So.
Well, I think it'll make you host if I drop, but just a warning. Okay,
that sounds great. Well, maybe what we'll do is we'll try to close out as quickly as we can, so that you and I don't lose it in the middle. And with that, maybe what we can do is, unless there are other comments, I will go on to Commissioner Olson for a county update to the community. And thank you, Beth, Mayor.
Thanks, Casey, and of course, thanks for Mayor Wytoski for putting these together, and yourself for putting together. I find them very helpful. A couple things that, and maybe Representative Gomberg could big this. I've had a lot of calls and a lot of questions why all of a sudden at the beginning, when the OHA first started doing their weekly reports, that they were all just listed as cases, and then last week they changed it to where you got the presumptive and the actual cases. Well, this week they went back to where it's just, they combined it back to where it's just cases, and they aren't separating the presumptive from the actual. I tried to get a hold of some people at ODA and said, why was that done that way? Why would you go, when we work so hard to get them separated, go back to reporting them all as one now? And I look at the positivity rate. We have a very low positivity rate. And I think we do have a problem. We're going to continue to have a problem. So I think that was one thing, is why OHA decided to go back to listing them all as one. So that was thing that's always concerned me. But the other thing is you know, I've been able to get back to some other meetings that are non-COVID related and things that are happening in the county. Unfortunately, Senate bill that was proposed by Senator Crapo of Idaho and Senator Wyden of Oregon to reauthorize the PILT and the SRS funds, that got stripped out of that bill. So it looks like right now that we don't even know if the reauthorization after this year, if we're going to get reauthorization for PILT or Safe Road to Schools, Secure Road to Schools programs. And that's a big thing for Yamhill County. The money we get from PILT and the money we get from the SRS from the federal government. So they're looking at, but they stripped that out for all the states. So that's something I've been working on. Then the other thing I've been working on is talking to many more. And in COVID area, I've kind of really linked myself to working with businesses, working with restaurants, more of the economic development. And I'm still hearing a lot of complaints that people like I think what Scott, the city of McMinnville is doing is real well, but I'm still hearing a lot of complaints that people are turning in their OLCC expansion request to expand their serving area, but they're just not getting any response, which was supposed to be a fast process. They're not getting any response whatsoever. There she is. But other than that, you know, things in Yamhill County are going well. It's in the point of we're negotiating with 3 different unions, so that always takes up a lot of staff and the commissioners' time. So I'm trying to get back into doing some stuff that's non-COVID related. So, and that's all I have, Casey.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Commissioner. It's Allie's 8th birthday today.
Hey.
Woo! All right, we're all ready. And 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear Allie.
Happy birthday to you.
And I'm very sorry for my singing.
We are too.
Thank you. That's very sweet of all of you.
Have a nice birthday, Allie.
Thank you.
Hooray! All right. Does anybody have any last thoughts before everybody's internet is unstable and their phones are about to die of battery dead? Counselor or Scott Cooper, Abisha?
I could go really quickly. One, I just wanted to acknowledge that both the city of Newberg and city of McMinnville declared June Pride Month. Also, Mr. Mayor Scott Hill led our city council meeting with affirming the Black Lives Matter movement and was followed by all of the councilors. We had some wonderful conversation, including with our chief of police, who also has submitted a written response to the 8 Can't Wait that's available for the public. And we're also looking at DEI training for counselors. And then I was hoping to ask a question that, one more thing on DEI training. The Oregon Wine Board has picked up free DEI training from Starbucks that was made in response to the murder of George Floyd and everything that's unraveled since. And so all Oregon wineries now have the ability to offer their employees free DEI foundational training and more intensive training. And then earlier you mentioned some, Mayor Wytoski, you mentioned some different information and rumors. And one thing that I get a lot of feedback on is what are our testing abilities in Yamhill County and in McMinnville, so that this would be a good place to put that question out so we could have a streamlined answer that we can put out to the public. And that's all I have.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Counselor. And maybe what I'll do is I'll make sure that we get our Director of Health and Human Services on our next roundtable so that we get an actual accurate one as opposed to me translating her language. So we'll work on that.
And I could just address that from the McMinnville, the Willamette Valley Hospital, and talking to Laura. She indicated that, again, they're doing approximately 30 tests per day, and that is primarily for those that are going into the hospital for any reason. They want to protect themselves and those that are going in. As she indicated to me, because individuals, they may be asymptomatic, but unless you have the signs, it's just a point in time. And so they don't have the capacity. They're sending it to the state. And so there's no widespread testing in McMinnville at this particular time.
Yeah, thank you very much. Scott Cooper from MEDP. Joya asked if you could update the community on Stable Table.
Yeah, really quick, the Stable Table Group, which is Downtown Association, the Chamber of Commerce, Visit McMinnville, and MEDP, McMinnville Economic Development Partnership, along with the city, are working on additional funding sources through Business Oregon's Emergency Grant Program. Round 3 is coming up towards the end of the month, here in a week and a half or 2 weeks. We will have an application likely in for that, for additional funding for underserved, typically traditionally underserved businesses in our community, women and minority owned. So we hope to have some news and some update on that very soon. And very briefly, instead of me going through all of the requirements and information for the closure of downtown and extending the businesses, please visit macdowntown.com. And Commissioner Olson, I'll talk with Dave Ruckless, the executive director, about the OLCC and see if he's made any headway and information on those applications for those downtown businesses as well.
That'd be great, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Great, thank you very much, Scott. Any last thoughts? I just want to make sure. I'm pretty sure that Nicole is a representative of the News Register, so I don't want to put her on the spot. But since I don't know, I figured I should ask, and she can unmute herself or do whatever she needs to let me know if she really needs to say something. So, or this person. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for another edition of the Friday Yamhill Leadership Roundtable. Remember out there, being outside is better than being inside. Keep your distance from other people if you can, and wear a face covering. And we can go through all of the science of all of that if you really want to, but we're not going to do it on Facebook. All right. Thank you, everybody. And remember, everybody who's here on this call is working for you. All right. And we'll see you on Tuesday.